Jaime Fraser is dead. Outlander Season 8, Episode 10 just aired. And the internet has not stopped shaking since. This is the finale. The last episode of the entire series. 12 years of love, war, and time travel all came down to this 1 hour. And what happened in the final 20 minutes left millions of fans in tears, in shock, and honestly, a little bit angry that it's finally over. If you thought you were ready for this ending, you weren't. Nobody was. Because what the show did in episode 10 is something almost no series finale has ever dared to do. And by the time the credits rolled, fans everywhere were asking the same terrifying question. Did Jaime Fraser really die? And if he did, how in the world is he breathing again by the final scene? Stick with me because we are breaking down every single second of this ending. And trust me, there is a lot more going on here than what it looks like on the surface. Let's start from the beginning of this final episode, because everything that happens at the end only makes sense once you understand how this season built toward it. Since the very first episode of Season 8, there has been one dark cloud hanging over Jaime and Claire's heads. A book. Frank Randall's book, the one that recorded real history, the one that named the exact battle where James Fraser was supposed to die. The Battle of King's Mountain. For an entire season, viewers have been holding their breath, waiting, dreading, praying that maybe, just maybe, the show would rewrite history for once. And when the finale finally arrived, it didn't waste a single second building toward that moment. Confronted it head-on. The episode opens with Jaime doing something that immediately tells you this is not going to be an easy watch. He starts putting his affairs in order. He is not preparing for a normal day. He is preparing to die. Jaime writes his will, and every single decision in that will feels like a man saying goodbye without actually saying the words. Claire inherits nearly everything he owns. His daughter Brianna is left with 2,000 acres of land, a piece of the ridge that Jaime built with his own hands. Young Ian receives his tools and his weapons, the same ones Jaime trained him with. Every grandchild is left 100 pounds and a share of his books. And then there is William. Jaime leaves William his whiskey and his Bible. And if you know these characters, if you know what William has been through trying to understand who his real father is, that single gift hits differently. It is Jaime reaching across a lifetime of silence and finally saying, "I see you as my son." By the time Jaime says his final goodbyes and rides out toward the battlefield, you can feel the entire mood of the episode shift. This is not a man walking into battle with hope. This is a man walking into battle with acceptance. And that is what makes the next few minutes almost unbearable to watch. Because for a moment, just one brief, fragile moment, it actually looks like Jaime is going to survive. The fighting stops. General Ferguson, wounded and defeated, is carried up the mountain. Jaime and Claire share a look, a breath, something close to relief. For 1 second it seems like history has been beaten. Seems like Frank Randall was wrong. And that is exactly when the show pulls the floor out from under you. As Claire begins to walk away, believing the nightmare is finally over, Jaime turns to accept Ferguson's surrender. And Ferguson, the same man everyone thought was finished, raises his gun one last time. A single shot rings out. Jaime Fraser falls. Claire feels it before she even sees it. The show has spent years reminding us that Jaime and Claire are bound together. Heart to heart, soul to soul. And in this moment that bond becomes almost unbearable to witness. Claire physically feels Jaime's pain rip through her body from a distance, and she takes off running, sprinting up that hill with a kind of desperation only someone who has loved this deeply could understand. When she reaches him, Jaime is lying there, still, gone. And Claire's grief in that moment is not written like television grief. It is raw. It is real. It is the kind of pain that makes you forget you are watching a show at all. But here is where things take a turn that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Claire refuses to leave Jaime's body. Roger tries to pull her away, tries to tell her they need to go, that there's nothing more that can be done, but Claire will not move. She lies down beside him instead. "He is home," she says. And in that single moment, the entire tone of the finale shifts from grief to something else entirely, something almost otherworldly. Because Claire is not just a grieving widow lying beside her dead husband. Claire is a healer. And this is not the first time she has stared death in the face and refused to accept it. If you have followed this show from the very beginning, you already know Claire carries something inside her that cannot be fully explained by science. Years ago, a man told her that she carries a blue aura of healing, something ancient, something tied to her very soul. She used that power once before, quietly, almost in passing, when she brought a stillborn infant back to life on Fraser's Ridge. Took only seconds that time. A flash of blue light, a breath, a miracle nobody talked about out loud. But Jaime is not a newborn. Jaime is a grown man who has lived a lifetime, who was destined by history itself to die on that mountain. And so when Claire lies beside his lifeless body through the night, refusing to let go, refusing to accept that this is truly the end, something extraordinary begins to happen. It doesn't happen in seconds this time. Takes hours. Takes everything Claire has. By the time the sun begins to rise, something inside Claire has changed forever. Her hair, once brown, is now entirely white. And if you remember what a Cherokee healer once told her, this is not just physical exhaustion. This is what happens when Claire finally reaches the absolute peak of her power. The moment she has been building toward her entire life without even knowing it. She poured every last drop of that power into Jaime. And then, as the camera holds tight on both of their faces, something happens that makes your heart stop. Jaime's eyes open. Claire's eyes open. And together they both take a breath. Let that sink in for a second. Jaime Fraser died on that battlefield. Frank Randall's book was right. History happened exactly the way it was written. And yet, somehow impossibly, both Jaime and Claire are alive again by the final frame of the episode. This is not magic in the traditional sense. This is not sorcery, and the show makes that painfully clear. What brought Jaime back was not a spell or a potion. It was love, pushed to its absolute limit, powerful enough to rewrite what should have been permanent. And that is exactly why so many fans online are calling this the most emotional ending in the show's entire 12-year history. But Jaime's death is not the only mystery this finale finally answers. Because if you go all the way back to the very first episode of this series, back to 2014, there has always been one unanswered question hanging over everything. Who was the ghost Claire saw standing outside her window, staring up at her, before she ever touched the stones? For over a decade, fans have theorized, argued, and debated about that ghost. And in this final episode, the show finally gives us the answer, and it is not the answer most people expected. After Jaime dies and is somehow brought back, we see him standing in a place from long before any of this happened. He is watching Claire and he is young. Not aged by decades of war and loss like the man who just fell at King's Mountain, but young, the way he looked the very first time he ever wandered through the stones by accident. This tells us something enormous. The ghost fans saw in the pilot episode of this entire series was never a version of Jaime from the future looking back one final time before dying at King's Mountain. It was Jaime from a completely different moment, wandering through time itself, watching over Claire long before either of them understood what their love would become. And then Jaime does something quiet, something easy to miss, but something that changes the meaning of this entire show once you understand it. He walks to the stones. He touches them. And as he does, tiny blue flowers begin to bloom right beside them. Forget-me-nots. If you remember the very first episode of this series, those exact flowers are what caught Claire's attention and pulled her toward the stones in the first place. They are the reason she went back a second time. They are, in the most literal sense possible, the reason she ever found Jaime at all. And now we finally understand why those flowers were there. Jaime knew Claire's fascination with botany. He knew flowers like that would catch her eye. So somewhere across time, in a moment we are only now beginning to understand, Jaime planted his own path back to the woman he loved, using nothing but a handful of flowers and the hope that she would follow them home. Now, if you thought the finale was done breaking your heart, it wasn't. Because right when you think you've caught your breath, right when you think Jaime and Claire's story has finally found its peace, the show gives you one more scene, and it changes everything you thought you understood about this ending. Stay through the credits because what plays after the final scene is not just a bonus. It's the last piece of the puzzle. We're taken to a bookstore decades later in the 1990s. A woman is sitting at a table signing copies of a book. That book is called Outlander. And the woman signing it is the author herself, sitting there in front of a small leather journal. When someone in line asks her about that journal sitting beside her, she smiles and calls it nothing more than a little bit of inspiration. But if you've been paying attention this entire season, you already know exactly what that journal is. It's the very same one Claire started writing in earlier this year, the one where she began putting her impossible story down on paper. In other words, the story we just watched for 12 years, the story of Jaime and Claire, of war, of loss, of a love strong enough to rewrite death itself, was never just a show. It was always meant to feel like it came from somewhere real. And that final wink to the audience is the kind of ending that makes you want to go back and watch the entire series from episode 1 all over again. But even with all of that, even with everything this finale managed to answer, it still left a few threads hanging in a way that has fans talking nonstop online. Fanny, one of the most quietly powerful characters this final season introduced, hears something in the earlier episodes that feels like it should have completely changed the direction of her story. A strange, unexplained sound that hints at something much bigger than what we ever got to see. And yet, once that moment passes, Fanny never really gets the chance to sit down with Claire, or even with Brianna, and unpack what that meant. It's a storyline that opens a door and then never quite lets us walk through it. And for a show that has spent 8 seasons paying attention to every small detail, that absence feels intentional rather than accidental. And then there's Claire's parents. Throughout this entire final season, Claire brings them up again and again, almost like the show is quietly building toward a reveal that never actually arrives. After everything Claire has lived through, after everything she has learned about fate, about time, about the forces that connect people across centuries, it feels like she deserved one final answer about where she truly came from. Instead, the finale chooses to leave that question exactly where it started. Open. Unanswered. And for a story built on the idea that nothing happens by accident, that silence speaks volumes.